Today I want to talk about a subject that maybe I should have highlighted more in my previous summaries. Forgive me if I didn't do that, because look, the anointing I have upon my life, I take it very seriously. So when I make videos and audio recordings to teach the word and teach about righteousness, I put in all the energy I have. I don't do half work when it comes to my calling, absolutely not. Today I was talking to someone about avoidance. I won't mention names and all of that, it doesn't matter. And this individual had issues with avoidance. So I'm making this recording not only for that individual, but for everyone that has issues with this. Okay. Avoidance. Avoiding something. The action of avoidance simply means that you go another direction to not encounter something, whether it's an individual or a situation. Let's say you're walking down the street and you see this dog that is wild, and you see that the dog is about to bite someone because the dog is very aggressive. Now, if you see that the owner of the dog does not have the dog on a leash and he is a bit physically weak, now what do? When you see that in a distance, your mind, so your brain, is alerting you of potential danger. So you have this reflex in your mind that you cross the street, that you walk, that you keep your distance from that situation. And there's nothing wrong with that because you're not stupid. You see that a dog is about to bite. So that's avoidance. Is that something wrong? No. Are you a coward doing this? No, absolutely not. And let's say that you are at the job and you have a boss who is out of his mind, literally, and he is paranoid and he's about to get violent also. You just agree with the boss, even when the boss goes too far. Why? Because you look at the situation. If you don't have a job, you can't pay the rent, you will lose your house. And you even have children at home they're dependent upon you economically. So you avoid confrontation with the boss and you allow the boss to go too far. Now, are you a doormat? Are you a coward for allowing this to happen? No. You are acting wisely. You are looking at the bigger picture. Alright? Okay, let's say you are on an airplane and suddenly the plane is about to crash. And oxygen masks are dropped in the airplane. Let's say there's a 2-year-old child besides you, or not even a child, it's a little baby. Now you may think, oh dear, this baby can't help himself, can't help herself here, and you put your oxygen mask you put at the child. Hold on a minute. That child is just a baby. Okay, so it cannot help itself. You are there and you're capable of helping that kid. If you give that child your oxygen mask first, then you are going to collapse. And if you collapse, who's going to help the baby? So you're not being selfish by taking in oxygen yourself first and then go to the child. Because if you lose yourself in the idea of helping someone else, you can't be any benefit to them, because in this case, if you, the adult, collapse, who's going to help the baby? The baby's still helpless over there. So by looking at the bigger picture, you avoid worse. So avoidance in itself as action, there's nothing wrong with it. But here's a trap. Often we develop a mindset of avoidance. And this mindset of avoidance is a trap. And it's this trap that will lead to bitterness. Okay? Let me repeat that for you. Often we develop an avoidance mindset. And it's this avoidance mindset that is the door that will lead to bitterness. Okay, let me give an illustration to show this to you. You have, let's go to Japan. You have Fumiko. She's in high school and she sees how there's this one girl that is being treated as trash by a boyfriend of hers. And this girl is so codependent upon the validation that she gets from her boyfriend. And Fumiko sees this happening, and she sees how horrible it is, and she thinks, that's not going to happen to me. Not going to happen. So she has decided that manifestation is not going to happen to me ever. So now, Fumiko goes online on the internet to look for scientific articles about codependency, about narcissists, how to identify a narcissist, how to identify someone that's bitter. And she realized that a lot of the articles she's reading from psychologists and also from people that used to be victims of psychopaths, a lot of what they say is true, and she can recognize those things around her. So this is what happens now. Fumiko, let me use the Japanese pronunciation, Fumiko, she begins to avoid people that reflect those, I would say that she has learned red flags by those articles. She's now applying them in her daily life. So people that reflect those red flags, she avoids. And she feels validated because indeed, she has relief around her. And she feels empowered in her decisions. But look at this from the other perspective. Fumiko's mindset is based in fear. It all goes back to that classmate of hers that was exploited by that boyfriend. She saw it and she thought, no, I don't want this. That was, okay, there's nothing wrong. She wants to avoid exploitation. But she lost perspective. Alright? Because she didn't see the situation clearly. In fact, it was a classmate of her that was exploiting the boyfriend. But she didn't see it well. She saw the guy's older and the girl keeps on complaining. So in her eyes, it was the guy exploiting the girl. But it was not the whole situation. But even if it was the guy exploiting the girl, this should not be sufficient for her to develop a whole mindset that I don't want this to happen to me. Who says it was about to happen to her? Who said that? She did. So that was an error on her side. Now Fumiko now developed a kind of, I would say, a feminist attitude. She's very distrustful towards men. She begins to think the worst of men. So without her being aware of it, she has developed expectations towards men that can't be defended. And sometimes she would treat men very ugly. And she would say it's just her opinion, it's just how she thinks, she's just honest. So Fumiko, in her college year, she dated about 3 guys. And she dropped all of them because they weren't manly enough. So one day, let's say she was now in her late 20s, a lot of her friends, so-called friends, and relatives are already married and expecting babies, and she's still there, single. And then one day at a bar, she meets a guy, and the guy is willing to listen to her ranting and complaining. And the guy tells her, you know what, Fumiko? No guy wants to put up with a bitter woman. When Fumiko heard this, she was thinking, what? You're calling me bitter? How dare you? And the guy tells her, listen, Fumiko, you have an attitude that you expect the worst of people, even if there's no evidence that there is some bad intention. I'm not saying you're always wrong, but you have this defensive mindset. You have this, you're seeking validation of your boundaries at all costs. You never even evaluate whether the boundaries you're maintaining are even worth it. You don't even see if the boundaries you force on people are really, let me say this, Fumiko, you force boundaries to validate yourself and protect yourself, and your boundaries are at the expense of others, but you don't care about it because you're only centered around you. When you do something, when you will something, you always have a reason for what you will. So your will, people just have to find a way to deal with your will. But when something else happens that's not in agreement with your will, man, there's no excuse for it. You go after people. Listen, Fumiko, no man in his right mind who want to put up with a woman like that. And when Fumiko hears this, she was shocked because someone has put, let me say that the guy, by being so straight up, he held a mirror before Fumiko, and Fumiko could now see her soul, that she has become bitter. Now, Fumiko has an option now. Either she acknowledges it and evaluates her way of thinking, and she lets go of ways of thinking and attitudes that don't add up, or she can go for the easy way. The easy way is to resist what she has heard and to lash out. Now, that's what a lot of people do, unfortunately. But do you see how this mindset of avoidance has progressed into bitterness? And Fumiko was not even aware of it? Despite she's not aware of it, doesn't change the fact that she has become bitter. And all began with that she wanted to avoid something happening that she didn't want. She lost perspective. Anytime you lose perspective and you're only focused on avoiding something, and you put the effort in avoiding that thing, once after you do it several times, a habit is formed, a pattern is built in your thinking, in your behavior. So now that you are in a pattern of thinking, you're now in a pattern of avoidance, you now seek validation for that pattern because it takes effort to maintain that behavior. Once this has happened, you're already trapped. You are already trapped, and often you're not aware that you've been trapped. And here's the thing, often when people go into a mindset of avoidance, they have a group of peers that validate it. For example, let me give another example here. Let's say that you had Kevin. Kevin grew up in a household where his father was quite verbally loud against his mother, and his mother used to accept too much of his dad. Since growing up, he saw that. And from time to time, his mother would lash out against him, and his mother would go too far. So Kevin grew up with this attitude that he doesn't want that to happen to him. So Kevin developed this personality of being serious and of being to the point. And Kevin is always very direct in what he wants. Now, Kevin thinks he's fine. Kevin is very honest. One day, Kevin is married. And in his marriage, he becomes frustrated at his wife. And now, he begins to scream and shout against his wife. And things almost got out of control. The wife had to call the police on him to keep him in check. Kevin was arrested. While being that night in jail, Kevin began to think, how did this happen? How did this come so far? I'm telling you what happened. Kevin wanted to be open and real because Kevin didn't want to have to deal with discomfort. He experienced discomfort while growing up on a regular basis. He had toys. He had friends. So he didn't have a bad childhood, if you want to call it that way. But he experienced discomfort in places you should never face discomfort, and that's affected him. But he's blind to this effect. He just doesn't want any type of discomfort. So he's very open with it. So very direct. And because of this directness, a lot of people didn't want to be friends with him, because people saw that he was quite defensive and he often didn't want to evaluate himself. He would just walk away when things would become very uncomfortable. And his wife, the reason he fell for his wife because his wife at the time when he was dating her, he saw her to be easy in behavior. That's what attracted him to her, because he had this longing to be understood and to be protected. That this longing he had in childhood and was not met, it became frustrated, and this was never dealt with. So Kevin's personality was a personality of avoidance. And Here's the thing, he finally got married, but he had the wrong expectations of marriage, as already should have been obvious to you. And in this marriage now he could not avoid anymore. So now all the, let me say, all the pain that has been built up over all those years, through all those people he got off and all of that, now it all came out. And the wife became frightened. And the wife even filed for a divorce because she didn't want her kids to have to face this. So Kevin became just like his own father. While he said to himself he would never become like that man. Why? The fact he wanted to avoid becoming like his father, that was a trap that developed him to the type of man his father was. I hope this is understandable to you. And look at this, while Kevin was much growing up, he had friends that agreed with him. When he cut someone off, when he said they didn't want to be friends with someone, or when he acted up, people say, well, Kevin, at least you're honest. People would validate his mindset of avoidance. And that's something people should not have done. Because Kevin was in the process of becoming bitter. But people didn't see it. People praised his honesty. And by praising his honesty, well, Kevin was validated and empowered, but in the wrong direction. Look, you have people out there who join cults just because they want to avoid. And look at this, when you join a cult, a lot of problems you will not face. For example, you will not have to face loneliness because you have people that think just like you. They can understand you because you all have a similar, almost the same way of thinking. And because of that, you spend a lot of time together. So there will be no boredom over there. And when it comes to finding a sex partner or a marriage partner, most likely you will find someone from that cult. So the probability of finding a sex partner is far bigger when you're part of a cult. So sexual deprivation is something that will decrease. That possibility will decrease when you're involved in a close cult. Now, of course, there are risks. You will be exploited. You will become isolated from the rest of the human community. You may even become bound under spells and all of that, but there are a lot of stuff that you want to avoid that you will avoid. And it's for avoidance that a lot of people join cults. And they don't join cults, how would I say, consciously, because if they would see it's a cult, they would run away. But because they're so into avoidance, they're not aware they're being drawn into a cult. They're not aware that they are joining something they would have joined if they would look at the bigger picture. You see what I'm saying here? So this mindset of avoidance, it's a big trap. There are a lot of people out there who became stuck in cults where they were exploited, where as sex slaves or as labor slaves, or where they became married to someone of a cult. They weren't aware even that it was a cult. They thought it was a spiritual movement, or they thought it was a political party that had the best intention for people. And indeed, in that cult they were drawn into, there were people with good intentions. Indeed, there were good stuff happening. But overall, it was a demonic stronghold, and they were not aware of it. And some people almost died because they were drawn into what I call a demonic stronghold. And what made them so vulnerable to be drawn into it? They wanted to avoid stuff. They wanted to avoid loneliness. They wanted to avoid rejection, or I'm saying being refused by other people. By the way, rejection is a hoax. I've made a video about that. Please look it up on my channel. I'm not going into rejection in this audio recording here. Or they want to avoid unemployment. And here's the thing: when you are part of a cult, much likely you will get a job, because a cult needs economic participation to sustain itself. So joining a cult, there are benefits, but those benefits are short-lived. And the disadvantages and the plagues that are involved will also manifest. Look, what I'm saying is that operating in the mindset of avoidance is very dangerous. And by the way, I'm going deeper with this. Operating the mindset of avoidance is a form of unbelief. So it's a mindset that's hostile and an enmity towards Christ. So how can you operate in a mindset that's hostile and an enmity? That means dedicated ill will towards Christ. How can you operate in such a mindset and expect things to go well? It won't. When you operate in a mindset, it doesn't matter whether you are aware of it or not. Most of the time you're not aware of it. But that you're not aware of it doesn't change the nature of what it is. When you operate in a mindset that's hostile against Christ, you are grouping yourself and you are keeping the company of demons. By you agreeing with a mindset that's anti-Christ, you are drawing demons onto you and you're feeding demons. And you know what? When you keep on doing this, demons are going to work for you because you empower them. And demons are going to assist you in avoiding certain people, in avoiding stuff. But when demons work on your behalf, it's only to bring short-term relief and short-term benefits that will cancel themselves out at your expense over time. Okay, I'm going to give an illustration now of a murder case. I didn't really investigate it, but I saw it in a documentary and I looked up information about it. And it was the case of a beauty pageant. Well, you have those Miss pageants, those elections where they choose the Miss of a country, like Miss Netherlands, Miss Rotterdam, or Miss Universe, or Miss World. Well, I don't really go deep into that, what's behind those Misses pageants, but we had this Mrs. Texas contest, and you had this young woman, blonde hair, blue eyes, a bit tall, nice figure. She won, all right? That was her big dream, to become Mrs. Texas. And she also had a dream to become a model and an actress. So after she won Mrs. Texas, there were people approaching her, and eventually she moved to Florida, away from her relatives. And there, man, she got new friends. She went to nightclubs. She had another lifestyle. She began to have multiple boyfriends. She was, as feminists would say, a modern liberal woman. Man, she had the time of her life. And you had those men that were so, I would say, desperate to get attention from her, and men would spend a lot of money on her also. And she would flirt with them once in a while to keep them happy. She had her own house that was beautifully decorated. And she was approached also for a role in a movie, I think. So things were going well with her. Well, at least according to her, things were going well. One day, the police receives a call from one of her ex-boyfriends that found her body in her home, and she was dead. She was murdered. It took a long while before they found out who killed her, because the case became a cold case. Now ask yourself, what happened to this young woman? Look, she wanted to be validated. That's why she wanted to become Mrs. Texas. I mean, I'm not playing a psychologist here, I'm looking at the bigger picture. She was already attractive without getting the title Mrs. Texas. And people could see she was attractive. Why did she compete and fight to get the title? Because she hoped it would gain her access to the model industry and become an actress. Alright, so she wanted the validation. She wanted validation to be seen. She wanted the fame. But she didn't look at the bigger picture. Why? If she would have looked at the bigger picture, she might have had second thoughts about fighting for that title. You know what? At those beauty pageants, by the way, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a girl or a young woman winning the title of a beauty pageant. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I'm not judging about that. I'm just want to tell you there's a bigger picture you need to consider. When this woman, I believe her name was Julie, I don't know her last name anymore. When Julie won that contest, she became Mrs. Texas. It was all in the news throughout Texas, and also in other states in America where they had similar beauty contests. She got attention of a lot of men, and that's what she wanted, to be seen, right? But many of those men, they were not good company. A lot of those female friends she got when she moved to Florida were not good either. But you know what? Julie was successful. She knew how to avoid people she didn't want to see at all. And now she lived in this house, or you can call it apartment, well decorated. She had her lifestyle. She knew how to say no to men, so she stood her ground. She had her boundaries. She knew how to avoid stuff. Also, in a sense, she knew how to get what she wanted. But it all led to her being killed. If you would have looked at the bigger picture, then probably she would have still been alive today. And her family and her relatives would not be in such grief. Look, am I saying now that you cannot participate in beauty contests? I'm not saying that. I'm using this case of this Julie, this Mrs. Texas, from somewhere in the 90s, I believe, that was later killed, I believe in 1996. I'm using that as a parable to reveal onto you that when you lose perspective, you are very vulnerable. You're already vulnerable as a human being because vulnerabilities are natural to us. But when you lose perspective, you become extra vulnerable. And it's when you're extra vulnerable, after you become extra vulnerable, you lose perspective by instant success. So when demons want to trap you, or when Satan comes after you, he will often give you instant success out of the blue. And once you've lost perspective because you're so into that prosperity, you are being drawn more and more into the trap. But you don't see it as a trap till you're completely locked off, closed off, and even then after you're not aware what's going on. And you know what? That's the same with this mindset of avoidance. Look, if you want to avoid certain things, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? If some people don't like you, or have something against you, they will something against you, there's nothing wrong with you wanting to avoid such people because you don't want to be somewhere. You think, I don't want to be somewhere where people don't want me because people are going to treat me badly. You don't want to be treated badly, so it's okay that you want to avoid such circumstances. But don't develop this mindset that you keep walking away when people develop a will against you. Because hold on a minute, you're there also. If you're at a job and people so-called begin to gossip about you, they develop a will against you, are you going to leave your job and lose your house and become homeless because people so-called don't want you? What? Are you out of your mind? I mean, yeah, you don't want to you don't want to get yourself into dangerous circumstances or into awkward situations. I understand it, but hello, you do, how I say, consider the will of others, but come on now, you're not going into full avoidance that you are going to exclude yourself from human interaction just because people have developed a will against you. You're not doing that. And well, you're also not going to, because look, that attitude of avoidance, as I mentioned before, that mindset, it will lead to bitterness, it will lead to violence. It often leads to narcissism. Alright, it leads to narcissism. Okay, just like that Fumiko I've spoken about in the beginning of this audio recording, that mindset of avoidance, it will lead to bitterness, or another way for bitterness is narcissism. Narcissism and bitterness are not exactly the same, but they are expressions of the same condition. Narcissism is one expression, bitterness is another. But people often don't see that. Look, and about me, I've learned from a young age to consider the interests of others and the will of others, but not to allow their will to become gods unto me. I mean, if I'm studying somewhere and some people develop a will against me, okay, I'm not going to fight with them, but I'm going to make plain with my attitude, I'm here. And if you choose to relate in the negative towards me, then you're the one relating in the negative towards me. But don't expect me to exclude myself, to drop out of college, or to do any of that just because you have a will against me. You're the one holding on to that will. You're the one that chose that will, not me. The same I had at the jobs, at the part-time jobs I had in the past. I mean, I'm not the type that I'm not going to look for a fight. I want to avoid conflict and avoid dangerous circumstances, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's why I learned as a believer to overcome. Look, people, and especially you believers, you live in the world. Jesus has not returned yet. The Messiah has not returned yet. That implies that the kingdom of heaven is not fully manifested on the earth. So you cannot expect a full manifestation of the kingdom of heaven on the earth right now when Christ has not returned yet. You live in the world, and Satan, or he's also symbolically called the dragon, is the little g god of this world system. And you're in the world, and the Most High will not remove you from the world. You are here in the world for his purpose. So acknowledge you're in the world, but don't be unequally yoked with the world, and learn how to overcome difficulties and learn how to overcome and subvert violence in order to walk in your calling. Alright? So again, I'm going to repeat it. Look out, and beware of this trap of avoidance. Because it's this trap that will lead to what people call narcissism and bitterness. And look, what people call bitterness, that people are emotionally in pain and they need help. Look, you have people that malfunction because of past hurts and because their minds are troubled. Such are people that need deliverance. And if you know how to deal with such people, then acknowledge that you don't, and don't try to fix things that you can't fix, okay? Acknowledge there are people that need deliverance. Some people need to be left alone so they can recover, okay? But you also have a second category. Those are people you need to be delivered from, because they've just chosen the dark side. Or let me say, or they may not have, let me say, consciously chosen the dark side, but they are progressing into the dark side. And a lot of people are progressing into the dark side, though, to this mindset of avoidance. They grow into narcissism, they grow into bitterness, they grow into denial. And that's a trap. Don't let it happen to you. That being said, be at peace.